Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we are going to paint a portrait of the most famous musician of all time, Elvis Presley. And particularly because there is a Elvis movie coming out right about now, and there's a renewed interest in Elvis Presley, and I have a few personal connections to Elvis that we'll talk about as we go through today's episode. But this is the painting that we are going to recreate from. This is an original photograph, and we're going to recreate it as a acrylic painting here in just a few moments. So let's just sort of look at how we're going to go here. These are all going to be time-stamped chapters in the description below. First, we're going to get the image onto the canvas. We have a outline, which I've done, and you can print this out. I'll show you that in a moment. We'll print out the outline, transfer it onto canvas, and then we're going to stain the canvas with a little bit of color. Then we will talk about Elvis's biography, and then we're going to get into the painting itself. Maybe do a little bit of outlining as the underpainting. Get the background, foreground. We'll mostly spend most of the time on the foreground because the background is fairly straightforward here. Okay, so let's move right in here. Actually, just before we go, just remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, take a photograph of today's painting, upload it to the Facebook group so that we can celebrate in your achievement. And if you find anything interesting, worthy of the price of a cup of coffee, consider leaving a donation via PayPal, the Super Chat function, or by contacting me via the Facebook group or my email, which is on my website. All those links are down in the description below. Okay. So, let's, oops, nope. We want, okay. So, I'm going to play this video, and then I'll talk over top of it as it's playing. Oh, come on. Technology, hey? Go. Oops, we want this one here. Eventually, okay, so we're going to be painting on a 9x12 sized canvas board, and I've bought these off of Amazon. They're better than the ones you get at the dollar store. They're $2 instead of $1, but far superior. And then I've printed out the outline from the Dropbox. I'll show you where that is shortly in a moment. Just on using my regular inkjet printer at home, nothing fancy, nothing special. You can print that off, and then you can see it's a little bit smaller. It's 8.5 by 11 on that 9x12 size canvas, which is perfect because there's a little room for tape. I did move it down a little bit, so there's a little bit more room at the top. And then I put some carbon paper in between the photocopy or the printout and the canvas, and then I'm just going to trace over that, and that's going to leave an impression on the canvas. So let's just speed through here, and you'll just see I'm not doing all of the lines in the hair, maybe every third line or so. And I think we're almost done there. Also, just before you take the tape off, you just want to do a double check and make sure that everything that you do want there is indeed there, so that you don't accidentally throw out or take this off before and you're, oh no, I realize I'm missing the eye. Trying to line that up is impossible. So I'll just show you where to get that outline so that you can print that off. Here's the Facebook group. I encourage you to join that Facebook group and upload your picture afterwards, as I said. In the description below, there's a link to the Dropbox folder. If you scroll down here to folder number 27, you'll see Elvis Presley. Click on that, and inside here, you will see 3 files. There's 2 of the outlines, and then the actual original photograph itself. Right, so just print that out, and you're ready to go. Okay, so now that we've got the image transferred onto the canvas, let's talk about the next step. The next step is a stain that we're going to do, and artists have been doing the Imprimatura, or as the Italians called it, going all the way back to even before Leonardo da Vinci, 500 years plus ago. I've been priming the canvas with a little bit of color, and we're going to do the same thing here so that you can really learn the proper traditional techniques that artists have been using for over 500 years. And you'll see here that I'm going to be using a very limited palette. We call this a split primary palette, where I'm going to be using 2 yellows, 2 reds, and 2 blues, one of which is warm, one of it which is cool or cold. And I've talked about this all in depth many times before, but you're going to see me in a couple minutes use a warm yellow. Now, you don't have to, Amsterdam paint is the brand that I use just because it's relatively inexpensive and it's fairly high quality, and I like that kind of balance. But if you don't have Amsterdam, I'm not sponsored or paid by anybody. No one gave me free supplies or anything. I've paid for everything myself. If you want to use a different brand, Golden, this is a very good, high quality, professional grade of paint, and this is, I would use the Cadmium Yellow Dark if I was using that set. Again, we've talked about this many times before, so you can watch some of the early Master Study episodes if you want. Liquitex, Winsor & Newton, Artist Loft by Michael's Art Supplies chain, Buzz, Peebo, Holbein, Daler-Rowney. We've talked about this many times, and I've shown photos in that very first videos, and it's in the playlist down below for the Master Study series, along with 240 other episodes, so you're welcome to check that out. There's paintings by virtually every single artist that you can imagine in there. More than just the 26 as part of this Paint the News series. Okay, so let's get some color on this canvas. So let's get this paint out, and you can see it in action. So here's my warm yellow, right? This Azo Yellow Deep. Every brand of paint has a different name for their colors. So if you're wondering, like, why I want to get the golden paint, but they don't have Azo Yellow, don't worry. It's just, it drives me crazy too. I just remember I'm lost, or I need to get my water. Okay, some fresh water from the sink. Just about room temperature is fine. Oops. Whoa, that's way too much water. So let's take some of that, dump it back in. Let's dump this water off. Okay. So I put about as much water, I put maybe about 1 to 1 water, maybe 2 to 1, I'm not sure, we'll see. This is the only time I ever use water when I'm painting with acrylic paint, because generally water, just think we clean our brushes when we use water. So if we use water all the time when we're painting with acrylic, we're literally breaking down the bonds that are holding the pigment to the canvas, and the painting becomes unstable, and the paint can potentially literally fall off the canvas, right? The basically paint is a pigment, usually like a dried powder-like form that is suspended in a medium. So if that medium, which is acrylic paint, is a lot like white glue, and if we put too much water in white glue, it doesn't stick to anything, right? Nothing sticks. It stops working like a glue. So instead of putting water in there, we'd want to put a medium. And if you go to your art supply store, you see there's lots of mediums, all of which have different properties. There's different chemicals, right? And different chemicals will do different things. And you'll see that today's episode, I'm probably going to use two mediums, a glazing fluid and a matte medium. Those are the only two things I think we'll need. So I'm not really concerned about streaks. We're going to paint over all this. Really what I'm just looking for is ridges. I want to have as little texture right through the middle of that face as possible. Okay. So I'm going to blow dry that real quick so that we can kind of have that solidified or plasticized as quickly as possible. Okay, looks like we're ready to go. That's nice and dry. Let's talk a little bit about who Elvis was here. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a moment before we get into the painting and just talk a little bit about Elvis's biography and maybe why we're painting today's painting at all, right? So, Elvis Presley, born January 8th, 1935, and dies August 16th, 1977, at the young age of 42. I'm already older than Elvis. I didn't even realize he died that young. You know, when we look at old images, or when we look at images of Elvis right before he died, I think my thought was that he was in his late 50s, early 60s. 42. Wow. And what, that last 22 years or so of his life, 23 years, was a whirlwind, especially, the kind of during the mid 1950s to early 60s. The kind of zenith of his career was probably more intense than really arguably anyone has ever experienced. There was a documentary, I'm trying to remember maybe it was an interview I was listening to with John Lennon, talking about, they experienced, as the Beatles, this incredible superstardom, but the difference is that there were 4 guys that were experiencing it together, who understood what that was like, and they could talk about it and confide in one another. Elvis was alone. I mean, Elvis had Colonel Tom Parker, but really most of the people that were in Elvis's life were kind of these parasites who were hanging off him and sucking him dry of his money and energy and talent. So he, I'm sure, felt very, very lonely. Very few people could ever understood what he was going through, and I don't think anybody understood what he was going through when he was going through it. So we could talk for hours and hours about Elvis Presley, but just for people who aren't very familiar with him, Elvis's early childhood was very difficult. Elvis famously was born as a twin. His twin brother was stillborn, his brother Jesse, and that, I think, always left this void in Elvis's life, but also in his mother's life. Elvis, not only was his brother born stillborn, his twin brother, but Elvis nearly died in childbirth, as well as his mother. So I think his mother always had this, was deeply traumatized by that incident, and always mourning the brother that never was, and Elvis always feeling like there was this other half of himself that was never fully realized, this ghost that he was always trying to sort of make up in his life for 2 children. And beyond that, Elvis's early life was he grew up in extreme poverty. Here we have, I think this is the house that he was born in. Obviously, this is also where his brother was born stillborn. They were rushed to the hospital, barely survived, and this house, which is now a historic landmark, is quite small. There was no electricity or plumbing here. They in fact depended on their neighbors for assistance for diapers. Often Elvis wouldn't have diapers or was using old diapers. The family lived on welfare and food stamps. His father was working whatever jobs he could. And to top it off, his father, Vernon, was arrested for passing a counterfeit check, for like a fraudulent check. I think it was in the amount of $4, and was arrested and thrown in jail for, the sentence I think was for 4 years. He did get released after 1 year on good behavior, but Elvis would sit on the front porch of his house crying, waiting for his dad to return, and obviously just a very traumatic youth. Now we can kind of skip forward here. Elvis becomes really interested in what's going on on the radio. The radio is fairly conservative country music, and even the country music being played at that time on the radio is really very wholesome, quite religious-oriented Christian music themes, which continue to this day. But that back then, that was really the only thing. Was a lot of biblical messages, and so he grew up in a very traditional religious family, and at the same time, Elvis, growing up in poverty, many of his friends and the people that he spent time with were African American, and he became acquainted with the music that they were listening to, and that was sort of his first real exposure to blues music, roots music, and kind of famously later on, when Elvis decides that he wants to try to become a musician, he's recording some more traditional songs, and during a break between recordings, he just starts playing That's All Right, I think. Is that the first song that he records? I thought that was what it was. And anyway, he records this song, or he's playing it, and then everyone in the booth is like, "Whoa, that sounds great!" It's not an Elvis. It wasn't written by Elvis. It was actually written by an African American artist, which begins this long history of Elvis doing covers of traditional music written by African American artists, re-recording it, repackaging it, and becoming very, very successful, very wealthy off those recordings, while the original musicians were never able to get airtime, and many of them died in poverty and total obscurity. And Elvis is obviously seen, even since like the early 60s, as the symbol of kind of white privilege, of white cultural appropriation of African American culture and music, and which is, I think that's a fair criticism. I think it's also, one can also make the argument that had Elvis not appeared, that the way that we look at those early recordings by many, like Leadbelly and early African American blues and even jazz music, had Elvis not occurred, we might have a very different view on that music than we do today. Because I think maybe a lot of people found Elvis, discovered his music, fell in love with it, and then started looking at the record store, or demanding, because maybe some of those artists didn't even have records, demanding that those artists would be recorded, and finding some of that original music. Anyway, famously, Elvis overheard his parents arguing about money, says to them, one day I'm going to become rich and famous. I'm going to buy you guys a Cadillac, which obviously he did, and that became, quite the prophetic statement, because obviously Elvis became one of the wealthiest artists in history, although, perversely enough, his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, who was a kind of a bit of a shyster con man manager, who did do an impeccable job of bringing Elvis to global celebrity, nevertheless actually earned more money than Elvis did. At times, the contract that Elvis had paid Colonel Tom Parker more than 50%, and at the time, a bad contract would be 20% royalties given to a manager. Parker took 50. Ouch. And not only that, like during, Parker sold off the rights to Elvis's music, and made more money than Elvis did on that sale. So had Elvis had better representation later on in his career, he would certainly, like, I think Elvis died with he had like $7 million in the bank, which today would still be a lot of money, but considering the vast fortune that he was worth, he should have been easily worth like hundreds of millions of dollars, not $7 million when he died. Gosh, there's so much stuff. I'm just sort of flipping through here. Really, Elvis has his kind of big break in 1956, where he makes his first, national appearance throughout the United States, and almost immediately just takes off. Like, there's Elvis, when he's recording his first few tracks, is a truck driver, and that's how he's making his money. He's barely scraping by, and within a few months, he's able to quit his job, and he is becoming one of the most famous persons in the country. Like, he wasn't an overnight success because he'd been working at this for a while, but it definitely, within a year, he had gone from total poverty and obscurity to one of the most famous human beings on the planet. What else should we talk about here? Obviously, one of the big draws that made Elvis very unique. Not only did he have an incredible voice and great rhythm, but he was a super handsome man. And not only was he super handsome, but the way that he moved was very seductive. He really was the first musician to have these throngs of screaming women trying to tear his clothes off on stage, and there had really never been anything like that. And Elvis is sort of like the person who comes around at the perfect time, with all of the, an incredibly talented musician, great voice, super handsome, great dancer. Just as television is breaking through, and more and more homes across North America have televisions, Elvis is one of the first musicians to really capitalize on that, and he's sort of made for TV. There's a lot of other musicians around the time who have maybe even arguably better voices and are making better music, but Elvis is, he was able to provide that extra little bit beyond the voice that someone would hear on the radio. Like, I'm just thinking of like somebody like Frank Sinatra, who probably was the biggest musician before Elvis. Frank Sinatra, also super handsome man, super talented, hilarious, great personality, but wasn't, quite the physical performer as Elvis was, right? So Frank Sinatra did great on radio, and he still was a great draw on television, as well as transitioning to the movies, just as Elvis did. But Elvis had that extra sexy quality that no one really had before him, or at least there wasn't the TV to help sell that aspect of his performances. Let's continue down here, because it'll just get us to the image that we're looking at today. So, also, in 1958, Elvis is drafted into the U.S. Army. Now, there's no... I mean, I guess the Korean War is just finished, right? But... So there's no... Elvis is drafted into the military, and Elvis is given the opportunity to perform as what was it? The special service, I think it was called, and wherein he would really just have... He would just be going around singing songs and entertaining the troops. Because, again, Elvis is, at this point, by 1958, Elvis is the most famous person in the United States. And not only that, Elvis is becoming more and more famous around the world. So Elvis is a global icon, he's drafted in the military and given the opportunity to sort of not actually have to experience what all the other soldiers are experiencing, but Colonel Tom Parker encourages him, or makes him, depending on how you want to think of that relationship. Parker encourages him to join the military as just a regular private, to go through basic training like everybody else, in order to kind of gain the respect of maybe more conservative, older audiences, which you know, was a brilliant strategy because it worked. You have to remember, Elvis, when he first appears, you know, there's people burning his records. There are churches calling him like the Antichrist for seducing young women and poisoning the minds of young men with his sexy movements. And when Elvis, you know, at the same time, Elvis is, you know, a fairly conservative kid from the South, and when the military calls, it's not like he was going to burn his draft card or anything. He signs up and he goes, just like Parker says, registers as a regular soldier. He goes to West Germany as part of the you know, Cold War, post World War II reconstruction of Germany. And it's also while he's in Germany that he meets his future wife, Priscilla. And Priscilla, of course, was 14 years old when Elvis meets her, and they have a long 7-year courtship while Elvis is in the military, and after the military they get married. I think she would have been, what, 21, I think, about the time when they finally got married. But that was also hugely controversial. There were a lot of people who were very upset about him having any type of relationship before she was, you know, 16, 17, 18. And so that was a kind of another little controversial stain on his career. But obviously, there's lots of other examples of musicians who had relationships with young women, and even more specifically underage women, right? Jerry Lee Lewis, you know, Great Balls of Fire, piano player, married his cousin who wasn't of age, right? So this sort of fits into this pattern of entertainers, musicians, performers, male performers who have these very, very, very young girlfriends and perhaps wives, right? Let's see, what else do I want to share here? So Elvis goes to the military. He comes back kind of like a hero, because while Elvis is away, before he goes away, he records a ton of music. So even while he's away in Europe doing his military service, he's continuing to put out albums, probably 5 or 6 albums during that couple of years while he's away, which is still really remarkable. And when he finally returns in March 1960, he records an album, almost immediately releases it. It's a huge hit. It's called Elvis Is Back. And for the next few years, Elvis again regains that prominence that he had before. Let's see, too. The other thing, too, that Elvis starts doing in the early 1960s after his military service is he begins this whole string of he tries to make inroads as an actor in Hollywood, and he makes a string of really bad movies. These movies which are hugely successful, but they aren't very good. I mean, most of them have one or 2 or 3 musical performances, and really they're almost like music videos to sell soundtracks and to sell more albums. Oddly enough, Elvis was given opportunities, given scripts to movies which later became very, very successful, but Parker turned them down, and there's lots of discussion. Why would his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, turn down these really good movies and push Elvis to take these B movies instead? And there's many different reasons why that happened. One of which is that Colonel Tom Parker had more control over Elvis when Elvis was performing live and recording. When Elvis is sort of being sucked into the Hollywood vortex, Parker sort of loses a little bit of that control, and a big part of that control is money, right? He's making a good chunk of that change. So I think Parker is probably anxious that Elvis will become an actor and abandon his music career and all of the money that comes with it. Because the other big thing with Colonel Tom Parker is he is a degenerate gambler. He is gambling vast sums of money and needs Elvis to be producing more and more music to feed his habit. What else do we want to say here? I mean, there's the new Elvis movie directed by Baz Luhrmann coming out any day now. Probably by the time you're watching this, it's already been out for years now. But it'll be interesting to see how that whole Colonel Tom Parker relationship with Elvis is explored. I mean, Colonel Tom Parker, a fascinating character in and of itself. Was originally born in Holland, and there's some speculation that he fled Holland because he had murdered someone and changed his entire identity when he arrived to the United States, and he was, until the day he died, he never got American citizenship. He never, even though obviously by the time Elvis is shaking hands with Richard Nixon, Parker could have gotten citizenship. He was offered it, but he turned it down, and many people speculate the reason he didn't want to actually get American citizenship is he didn't want anyone digging too deep into his past to find out some of the skeletons in the closet, a murder potentially being one of those reasons. Let's see. Elvis marries Priscilla in 1967, and of course they have a daughter, Lisa Marie Presley, that later married Michael Jackson and Nicolas Cage. So the wildness of Elvis Presley continued through his daughter's life as well. Let's see. There's obviously the famous 1968 comeback special where Elvis dressed in leather. It was intended just to be a throwaway TV performance, but Elvis turned it into something big, and this is really a big turning point in Elvis's career, where he's now a little bit older. He's at this point in his early 30s, and like 33. So he's no longer the 19-year-old kid that is, barnstorming all over the United States, performing in these sellout shows with screaming girls. His audience is also 10 years older, and he's appealing to a much more mature audience. But that, I think, really sort of sets him up for his Las Vegas residency at the International Hotel, because once Elvis does that, I think people are reawakened to Elvis. Kind of in the mid-60s, Elvis is doing his movies stuff. The Beatles become hugely popular, and Elvis sort of kind of drifts a little bit into the background. There's a lot of, Elvis is seen as sort of a symbol of the 50s, of the birth of rock and roll. And now all these the children of rock and roll have taken over, and Elvis is kind of a little bit of like a dinosaur of the past. That 68 special brings him back to the forefront, and he kind of capitalizes on that with the Las Vegas residency, which he does all the way up until shortly before. Well, Elvis's last performance in Las Vegas is December 12th, 1976. And I don't know the exact numbers here, but I did hear my parents at one point mention that I might have been conceived after one of those final performances in Las Vegas in December of 1976, because I was born September 15th, 1977, and that was just a few weeks after Elvis Presley had died. So Elvis Presley dies August 14th, is it? August 16th, 1976. So a month after Elvis dies, I was born. So I remember when I was, a teenager, always thinking maybe I'm the reincarnation of Elvis Presley. You know what I mean? You know, maybe I'm Elvis deep inside, right? Let's see. Those final years of Elvis's life are quite sad. Oh my goodness, all these things are. Let's open all these back up here. So these are photos of Elvis shortly after, on New Year's Eve in Pittsburgh. You can see what he looked like. Oh, I guess that won't let us enlarge. Here's a photograph from Elvis's final show on December 12th, 1976. Here's some photos of Elvis in December 1976. So, Elvis Presley, famously was a junk food junkie. He ate this really disgusting meal. Let me see. I think there's a photograph. Can't remember. There are images of the food that Elvis ate towards the end of his life, which was a loaf of bread hollowed out, stuffed with bacon and butter and peanut butter, and then deep fried. And Elvis would eat one of those a night, sometimes 2 or 3, and that thing would have somewhere between 20 to 30,000 calories, right? A calorie bomb. And looking at these photos of Elvis, the year before he died, he's a little bit overweight, but not too much. I'm like, oh gosh, I feel like that's how much he was eating, and he's still. I would like to be a little bit trim as Elvis looks in these photographs. Anyway, what else do I want to mention here before we move on? As I said, this is the Baz Luhrmann film. It looks really good. I'm really interested to see how it goes. I have seen a number of interviews with the star of the film here, Austin Butler, who plays Elvis Presley, and I was pretty skeptical, but now I'm very, very excited to see how that film turns out. So let's just quickly look at today's image before we paint it. So the image that we are going to be studying from, I could not find the author's name. It's interesting, if you look up photos of Elvis, often there's like a red background, and I don't know if that's because there was a red backdrop that was set up, and then Elvis is getting hundreds of pictures taken at the same time wearing different outfits, which is entirely possible. But if you look, you do an image search for this photograph, you will see lots and lots of them. So this is the actual full-sized image. You can see the clothes he's wearing, this kind of frilly shirt. But the one that we are going to be doing is a kind of a cropped version of it, right? And it's, doing my research, it comes up as January 1st, 1960. At that time, Elvis is still in Europe, in West Germany, preparing to come back to the United States after his military service ends in March 1960. So even though this photo is dated January 1st, 1960, I would say it's actually probably afterwards, because this type of hair would not fly in the military. Elvis, very famously, when he showed up for his military service, the photographers were there watching him get his hair cut to a very, that typical army close shave cut. So anyway, but it's around 1960. It's potentially more likely that this photograph was taken after he had returned for publicity for the Elvis Is Back album. Anyway, just thought it would be kind of interesting to point out where that image was taken and what period of time. So let's move into our next phase of the painting. We are going to start here with a little bit of underpainting. So often what artists do is, you might do a little bit of priming, and often artists, instead of using this warm yellow, might use a bit more of a brown, reddish brown. I've done this so many times using the warm yellow, and I've done comparison versions in brown, and the difference is there is a difference, but it's so negligible that it's not really, I think, especially if you're a beginner painter, you can feel quite satisfied of having done this, and you're going to get great results. So let's put some paint on the palette. I always say I put about as much paint on my palette as toothpaste on my toothbrush. So you don't want to put too much paint on here, because if you don't use it, then it just goes into down the sink later on, and it gets eaten, microplastics eaten by fish, and that's no good. So I'm going to mix a black there. That's why I'm putting that color there. Okay. So, which brush should we use? Let's use this one. So, to get a black, what I do is I'm going to mix my cool blue, my cool yellow, and my warm red together. Right now, I've just put these sort of blobs together, and we'll see what the result is here. Because essentially, all of these colors cancel each other out, and they pull right. They go right into the center of your color wheel. Now this color right now has a bit of a brownish quality. If I want a black, so what you do is you think about this. If this color is brown, that's telling us we have a lot of yellow and red and not enough blue. If we put some blue in here, it's going to pull that color back, because that color, let's say imagining it's right over here. Put some blue, it'll pull it into the middle. If, however, it was a greenish color, it tells us we've got lots of yellow and blue. We need some red, so it's to pull it back this way. If it was a little bit purple, that would tell us we've got a lot of blue and red, and it's existing down here. We need more yellow to pull it into this area here. Now, I actually don't mind this color as it is right now, especially for doing a little bit of underpainting. It might be nice to have a bit more of a brown rather than a black. So I'm actually going to leave it like that, but if I want it to be black, and I'm going to make it black later, I'll add a little bit more of that cool blue. So let's get some of this color on here, and let's look at the original. Let's put them side by side. So here, what I want to do is make sure that I capture things like these eyebrows. get these eyes. So this is very helpful because it's shortly here we're going to paint out a lot of these lines and they're going to disappear. So having this is going to be a big lifesaver. I mean, some of this, like in his forehead, that might be a little bit dark. But we'll just, when we get there, we can kind of paint a little bit lighter so that he doesn't look like, otherwise, because a dark lines like that in the forehead might make him look a little bit older, right? The other thing too, these big lips, like Elvis's lips are huge, and I think that's also kind of a thing that sort of made him a little bit unusual and kind of sexy. As you know, those big lips tend to be a feature we associate with women, and you know, I have a friend who's always going on and on about how what makes rock and roll is the androgynous quality of musicians. That there's a kind of gender confusion that makes things kind of adds to the danger and transgressive quality of music. I don't know if I agree with it, but it is interesting just to think about why some musicians make it and become legends while so many others don't, right? I'm sure there were a lot of musicians looking at Elvis thinking, what? This kid? Really? Why is everyone so obsessed with him? So all of this will play a role later on. Now you don't need to do this, but as a teaching class here, I think for many of you might find this kind of a strategy to be very helpful. So that's why I'm doing it. When I do my own paintings, I don't really do this kind of thing because I'm a little bit more confident in my ability to find these details. Oh, wait, let's just get these right there. Okay. So that's good. Let's just take a quick second to blow dry this so that we don't smudge anything. Actually, you know what? Maybe before I move on here, let's just take a bit more of this cool blue. Actually, make our gray or my black that I was talking about earlier. So it's going from brown to black. That looks pretty good. Maybe just a bit more blue. There we go. So I'm not sure how visible that is on camera, but that's a good black. And we'll use this to modify the value of various different colors as we go here. That's why I made it kind of a nice big batch of it. It's always helpful to have that available. Okay, so I'll just wipe this brush, clean this brush off. So let's move to the next step here. So now we've got the drawing established, we've got the color on here, the Imprimatura, and then we've got a little bit of underpainting. Now let's do the background. We'll put some color in the background and we'll move on to the foreground. And the color in the background for this painting is really pretty straightforward here. It's a red background, but what red do we really want to put back there? That's the big question. So, you know, the color that's in that background is very similar to the color that's in his clothes. So much so that I have a suspicion that there's been a little bit of photo editing, not Photoshop, but darkroom editing, where potentially there was some sort of filter that was put over top here to just really isolate his clothing and turn it all red, because it just, like the way that it's sort of blown out on these sides just suggests that there was some manipulation that might have happened 50 plus years ago. So that sort of gives us an opportunity to maybe do something a little bit different. So what I think I'm going to do is to emphasize warm and cool colored contrasts by putting a cool red in our background. And therefore when we paint his face and his shirt a warm red, there's going to be a nice opposition of color temperatures there. And that cool red will go into the background. So, if we just take this cool red on its own and apply it into the background, it's going to get pretty dark. In fact, we can just take it and just see. Right? Actually, not bad. You know what? Let's just take this warm red. I'm going to take it right out of the tube. And I'm going to paint it right on here. I was going to put a little bit of white in here. But you know what? It seems to be doing pretty well. That white would have given it a little bit of slightly pinkish quality. It would also have covered a bit of that yellow up. But It would also, a little bit of white does make things recede. So technically we could have put a little bit of white into warm red and tried to see if that would help push that background backwards. But this is also kind of a fun thing. I've never done anything quite like this, so this will be kind of a fun little experiment, which is what I want all of these episodes to be, is demonstrations of how color actually works. So I'm thinking to myself, is this going to be enough? Do I want to do a second coat of cool red? I mean, that looks pretty neat. Like, that's a stunning color. If I paint it again, we'll have a bit more of an even color, because there's a little bit of transparency here. I think I will put a second coat of it. Now, I don't mind the yellow coming through. It's just a matter of us having a kind of a nice, because sometimes you can see it's a little bit choppy. Yeah, let's let it dry. We'll blow dry this, and then we'll put the a second coat of cool red on here. So I'm going to blow dry it. Just put a little bit more paint on the palette, and let's just do this one more time. Ooh, it definitely changes. Wow, that color, now that it's more solid, it goes from kind of a bit more of a warmer red, and it looks much colder. So we have much more of a magenta all of a sudden, whereas with that warm yellow underneath that first coat, it looked much more like a warm red. So that's interesting. That's something to kind of just keep in the back of the memory bank there. How that warm yellow really emphasized the, it turned this cool red much warmer. You notice how I'm painting over a little bit of the hair and the skin too? That's totally fine, right? That's why we're painting the background first, is that we can get away with stuff like that. If we were to do the face first and then try to do the background afterwards, then we'd have to be so careful about this step to not paint over all the details in the face that we just labored over. I am wondering if I want to do another coat. It's going to get progressively darker. That's one of the reasons why I was thinking of adding yellow to it, white to it, because that would kind of prevent it from getting too much darker if I do it a third time. I think that's going to be okay. It's still a little bit uneven. I don't think you could see it on camera, but I think it's going to be fine. I don't need to be super upset. So I, of course, knocked my paintbrush right into the only little bit of wet part of canvas. So now it looks like I am gonna get this a little bit more even just out of necessity here. Because now that I did that, it's like, well, I gotta do the rest too, otherwise that part's gonna be a little uneven. So, and also, had I put a little bit of white in it, it would have been a little bit easier to go even. It's just one of the oddities. Okay, so let's try not to drop this brush on the canvas this time, Michael. Okay, I think the background is done now. I think we can ready to move on. So let's move on to the foreground now. Now that we've got some color in the background, I think we'll start with the skin tone. We'll get the face painted. Or at least we'll start with getting a color, a flesh tone here, and then we'll do hair and the shirt afterwards, right? Because we usually want to build from what's the furthest behind, and that's why we start with our background. Then we go to the face, because the hair is on top of the head, or in some instances in front of the face, and then the shirt is also in front of the neck, for instance, right? So let's just think about our skin color here. And so what I'm looking for is the underlying, what we call the local color here. And I would say the color I want to mix is probably this color right there. Because we have, like, you know, some more purpley colors. I'm not even thinking about the shadow yet. We'll do that separately. But we have like a purpley, you know, purpley colors around here, which we can use. And all those, like, kind of very famous baggy eyes. Yeah, so this is going to be kind of like a peachy orangey color, and we're going to make it as a warm color as well. So we'll take our warm yellow, we'll make a big batch of it, warm yellow and warm red, and now we get this kind of a nice orange color. And now we're going to take some white, put white in here. And let's look at these side by side. So I think we need a bit more red in here. It looks very yellowy on camera, but that's very peachy. I think that's okay. So we're just gonna make a bigger batch of it. Let's take more of this, and a little bit more red, and then I'm going to take a bit of matte medium. And the purpose of matte medium is to thin out your paint. Whoa, that's more than I was expecting. Let's just move some of that out of the way there. So this is going to spread the paint a little bit further. And let's see here. What I'm also going to do here is paint over my black lines a little bit. So I'm going to take a smaller brush and make sure, oops. Okay, so that face is, keep widening. I should have blow dried my background because now I can't kind of rub that paint away. So we'll see, like his face keeps getting wider and wider and wider here. So I might have to clean that up later because really it should be much thinner. So that is what it is, but that's why we sometimes do the background twice, right? We have multiple passes on those areas. Okay. So you could obviously, it looks like we've lost a lot of detail. but it's still there. We can see those lines. That's why we painted our dark lines previously, so that they wouldn't disappear on us. What's next here? Looks like we'll let's actually get his hair and shirt in at this stage too. I think that would be helpful. So his hair is this kind of dark brown. Let's go to a smaller brush now. So it's the same sort of thing, except we're going to be using more red, and we're going to put a bit of blue into this as well. A little bit of blue is going to make this a really dark brown. So we don't want to go totally dark just yet, because we want to have a little bit of lighter brown in here, kind of coming through the as kind of a highlight, right? So we'll just paint over those red lines, or that overspray, or whatever however you want to think about it. Okay, now I got it kind of painted in. I'm just going to kind of make sure that this hair is kind of following the contours of the shape, right? So that they aren't contradicting these curves. Okay. Oh, that, oops, I just missed a little bit back here too. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint his shirt this warm red, and we should then very quickly see the difference between a warm red and a cool red. Now, I think I'm going to go in here a little bit. Now, on camera, I don't know how much of a difference we're going to see. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. We'll get there when we develop a little bit more of the body, but so now, after this, I'm going to continue working on the face, and I might do a lot of the face, and then when that's done, go in and fix the background, trim his cheek in a little bit, because right now he looks a little bit overweight. And while we could just go, oh, this is Elvis in the 70s, late 70s. I want to try to stay true, as close to the original as possible. The original photograph. Okay. Let's blow dry that. Okay, I want to take more warm red and just repeat this. Give a little bit more solidity here in this red. Okay. I think what I'll do now is let's paint a little bit of gray in his eyes. I think that would be helpful. So we'll take some white. Let's do this right here. Let's take a bit of the black. If you're ever wondering, is this actually black or is it a purple, just add white to it and you'll see very quickly what the actual color is by adding white to it. So there's just a little bit of matte medium that I've added here to make it a little bit thinner. And we'll just paint this. It's going to paint right over top of the eyeballs, or the iris and pupil. Just wiping away some of that paint. There we go. So, what should we do next? I think let's get some darker values in here. We'll take the skin tone and really make it a lot darker. We'll get in some of the shadows first to start blocking in these darker areas. So to make that, well, we got a bunch of different ones going on here. In fact, let's just look at it together. So we've got some purpley colors. We've also got this much darker, what color is that? Kind of like a dark, deep crimson color. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix like a dark, warm purple. I need some more warm red. So to get this purple, what I'm going to do is take my warm red and my cool blue and mix them together. So if there's a little bit more red in there, it's going to go a bit more brown. A little bit more blue, it's going to get a bit more purpley. So, you know, this color it's a purple, but it's a pretty muted purple. If we want a saturated, bright, intense purple, we would have used our cool red. That way we would get a really saturated. This one's much less intense. The saturation's not quite as intense, but I like it because of that reason. I think we always think, whoa, I want the most intense colors, but it's harder to use those. There's less opportunities to use them, unless you're painting candies in a candy store or something, right? So that's a pretty good dark color, but rather than just launching right into it and painting this everywhere, let's go a little bit slower. We'll take a bit of glazing fluid. I'm actually going to wipe off as much excess paint here as possible, and then I'm just going to take this brush, rub off kind of the majority of the paint, and then let's just rub it into our glazing fluid here. So this glazing fluid has a slow drying component, which will slow the drying time down and give us a little bit more opportunity to be able to work with that paint. And so, speaking of which, before I do anything, I'm going to blow dry this just a little bit more so that if I do want to smudge or smear or wipe things off, I don't ruin anything else. So you can see what I'm doing there really quickly is just moving my finger around, and if I, like, everything's kind of smooth, then sometimes you hit this like patch of sticky paint, right? It's dry to the touch, but if you were to sit your finger on there for more than a second, it would kind of pop off. It would stick to your fingers. I do not want that. Okay, so let's get these two on camera. We're going to take our purple and just dive right in. I'm also going to take another brush that I can use to kind of blend things with. Right, so that's pretty subtle. We'll build up here, but it's nice just to kind of start out slow. Right now I have to just wipe that away. Dry, Michael. You get so impatient. I don't like that little line that formed there, so I'll just wipe that away. Right next to the hairline, it's often a little bit of shadow there. What is going on? Why is that? Just a little bit. Don't like So let's blow dry that. I'm going to continue with a bit of this on the side of the face here. Even darkening on that eye there. Kind of regret well, we're gonna brighten up some stuff here shortly, but maybe shouldn't have done those wrinkles on his forehead. Not too happy with that at the moment. Maybe should I want to do a little bit more before I do those eyes. Maybe let's get the lips in. I think that would be helpful. So let's just take this warm red and a little bit of the color that we had there before. So I mean, just a bit of white in there. Okay, so just gotta clean a few brushes here. blow dry that. So what I want to do now is I want to let's do some highlights. So let's take this color that we used for our original value for the skin. We'll mix a different version up top here. There's our white as well as some the glazing fluid. Or is that matte medium? That's matte medium. I'm going to add glazing fluid into it. Yeah, that's matte medium, so it wouldn't behave the same way. Okay. I was actually a little bit leery about even using this, considering making a different mixture, because that matte medium will kind of dry much faster. But I think we'll see. Famous last words, perhaps. But I was a little worried that perhaps this might be not be able to blend quite as well. So let's put in this highlight right here. It's definitely not blending the way I would like it to. Or I expect it to. It's not behaving the way I'd like, but that's okay. We can still make use of it, and we can, if worse comes to worse, we can just make this a much more kind of impressionist type of a painting. let's just blow dry that. Okay. Okay. We're going to darken more, but now we've got, I'm not even sure, I might do a little bit more highlighting, maybe even add a little bit of a blue tinge to this light coming on this side, but I don't know. It's looking pretty good so far. It looks a little bit creepy with those eyes in there, but as soon as we do that, I think the painting will really snap into view. Let me blow dry that. Okay. I think, just to be kind of a little bit tricky, I'm going to do his hair and his shirt next. Just to give so that we'll have a little payoff towards the end. Okay, so let's do his hair again. I wonder, this is our purple. I'm just looking at the original thinking, can I use the purple for his hair in any way? Possibly. Let's do a bit of purple in that hair. Let's take a bit of glazing fluid again. You know what? I am going to put a bit of yellow in here. Otherwise, it's going to be just a little bit weirdly purple because I don't really see that color in here. So just put a little bit of warm yellow in. And do I want to do, you know what? Okay, let's, where's my small brush? I'm going to take this color and just do a bit of line work with it. A lot of this is going to get covered up and get darker, but I think it'll be kind of satisfying if you see just a little bit of the texture of the hair. Take a few minutes to do this. I think I'm gonna turn the canvas. It'll make it easier for me to paint this. So let's actually Ah, it's not on camera. Gosh. Sorry. Seems pretty silly, doesn't it? Now, by no means am I saying this is the only way to paint hair. This is just my own technique. I've seen lots of different ways of people painting hair. I just find this way is kind of nice because I can glaze over top of it, darken it, you know, so these lines can almost completely disappear. But if I want to keep just a few of them, then I just don't glaze it all. And anyway, so this is take it or leave it, however you want to do hair. So I think I'll just let this dry for a few minutes. Let's do the shirt down below. Actually, you know what? I could probably use this same color, just make it a much more reddish. So let's take the same color. Let's take our color we were just using, but just add more red into it. We'll take our glazing fluid. So it's just a really, really dark red. We could also use the same thing to darken in and around the face. Now it's hard to really see what is going on here clothing wise, so I'm sort of making up a little bit as I go here. Okay. Okay. Let's have a sip of tea time here. I think now let's do, actually, that hair needs a little more. So let's do these eyes and things now. We're gonna break out the black and go right to well, we can take a little bit of this color, but mostly it's gonna be black. I'm also gonna take a little bit of glazing fluid, which is gonna make these lines just a little bit transparent, which is okay, because I can also wipe things away if I'm not happy. And I love having that option. So how about, let's go right in like that. Okay. So let's start. Oh, what color eyes does he have? Green eyes. Let's just keep that. Looks like I've made his eyes a little small. He's got kind of green eyes, doesn't he? So let's take some warm blue and warm yellow. Let's make some green eyes for him. Maybe a little bit more on the blue side. Okay. Okay, so now let's take more warmer. I guess we could even just use this color in here, really. Not quite a black. blow dry things in a second and just go do another pass of this, but let's just... Yikes. Drop the paintbrush on the painting. I keep doing that lately. Just take a look here. Getting there. I'd be curious to know in the comments what your favorite Elvis song is. Everyone's got a favorite. I think probably my favorite would be Heartbreak Hotel. Well, since my baby left me, boom boom, I found a new place to dwell, boom boom, down at the end of Lonely Street. Heartbreak Hotel, life is so lonely, baby. Realized it's muted. So I'm going to take that same color that I was doing my highlights with, and let's just get bit. Maybe it's worth diving in here. Might have been, you know, a bit too much. I might have done a bit too much there. Like, especially on this side, I could probably have gotten away with a little bit less of it. Take a bit of red glazing fluid. Just gonna add this red to the ear. Maybe it's a bit too much. Just give a little bit of texture in here, in that ear. I should have done this earlier, but you know what, maybe I'm just going to kind of cover it up because it's going to be kind of hard to do this right here. I feel like now I gotta do a bit of highlights on there too, just a few. Okay, I want to go back to these eyes. So this eye over here is too open. So let's kind of close it down. So I'm gonna take my highlight and my dark color here, just get a kind of mix of them both. Let's take that color, maybe just a bit more white on there. Put that highlight in here. Okay, I think I just want to, we're almost done, I think. So let's just, let's get ready for that. Okay, so we're almost done. I just want to do a few more finishing touches, including just darkening even more the darker side, and maybe get a bit more purpley color into his eye here that's in the light. So his forehead is really bright. I am kind of tempted to darken that down a little bit, but I don't know. I might just leave it. It's not, because what happens if I put this over top of here, that white that'll be underneath is actually going to make that go very pinkish. So I might just leave it. It's not a huge problem. So let's get more of our, let's get a bit more of a purpley quality, I think, in here. Should blow dry this actually. almost done here. Okay, let's want to do this again here. I am tempted to put a bit of warm red back in a few places. So let's just do a bit of that. I'm going to blow dry it. Actually, you know what? I think I'm pretty happy with things. I think what I want to do, though, just to finish off, is maybe just do a little bit of cool red over here. I don't need much, but just to clean up this edge. I don't know. Maybe I don't... You know what? I think I'm going to just leave it there. It's not exactly what I was planning on doing, but I kind of like it. I think I'm going to keep it. So, it's its own thing, and every painting always goes in a different direction than you expect. And as soon as you understand that, most of painting just gets so much easier, because you just go for the ride rather than try to drive all the time. Let the painting drive for you. So this is for June. It's not after anything, it's okay. So I think we're at that time where we can wrap up. Okay, so I think we're done. There's more that I could do, and there's issues I have with it, but I think if I just continue working on it, I don't think it's going to get better. It could get better. It could maybe get 10% better, but it could also get 50% worse. So I think I'm going to, end here before it gets worse. I'll take my chances. So let's look at these two side by side. Actually, just before we do move on, just as a quick reminder to hit like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, take a photograph of today's painting, upload it to the Facebook page so that we can celebrate your achievement. Also consider leaving a donation as little as $1 through the PayPal Links below, super chat. If you want to contact me through my email or through the Facebook group, those links are down below, and you can send an e-transfer if you like. Literally $1. Okay. So here's them side by side. Obviously, I added a lot more white in here because I didn't like the intense wrinkles on his forehead that I painted way back in the beginning. So I tried to paint them out a little bit. It actually works as a painting. When I compare it to the original, of course, I think, oh, maybe I should add a lot of kind of red, pinky color over top. But that could cause some problems. I was also thinking of doing the same thing over here, adding a bit more red. But I kind of like that in the intense contrasts that are formed here. It's not exactly like the photograph, but I don't mind it as it is. The other thing too, I was thinking maybe I want to develop his nose out just a little bit, but I think I might be happy. It would give him just a slightly bigger nose. Let me just see. That highlight really bright. I'm going to do that up here too. So I'm just basically using white with just a little bit of yellow. Just a little bit of a highlight. That chin too. Actually, you know what? Let's just leave that. I think it's okay. Did want to maybe curve it a little bit. Do I want to curve it? You know what? I think it's going to be more problems than it's worth. So let's just leave it. Okay, let's zoom in. So, you know, I'm actually quite pleased with everything. It is very brushy, but I also like that particular style. So that's why I kind of painted in that style. That's why I paint that way. You know, I maybe overemphasized a little bit of things, but part of doing anything like this is sometimes taking a little bit of liberties here. I think, you know, the proportions for all the rest of the facial features are there. So it's not really about making it photographic. It's about, you know, kind of an interpretation. And I like how that looks. I like how intense those eyes are with that extra, you know, little bit stronger contrast than in real life, I think. About the same. Actually, maybe I could have even have gone a bit darker there. But maybe let's just look. Let's go to the hair, actually. Let's just quickly look up there. You know, there is that blue light that I was thinking about doing a little bit of blue glaze there. I think it could look cool. And if somebody did that, I think you could get some pretty cool results. I just decided that maybe there was enough here at this point in the painting. Let's look at the hair over here. I did cover his ear a little bit, just because I should have probably painted the shape of the ear and then painted the hair over top of it, but it is what it is. You can also see this is still quite yellowy, and I was, as I said, planning on maybe putting a bit more red over top of it. Again, I don't mind it like that, but it is a difference, obviously. Yeah. The other thing too, you can see how I quite more dramatically added that line there. I was at one, you know, when I did this, I was thinking, you know what, that cheek has gotten quite wide, and I was going to paint over it with the background, but it actually turned out kind of nice. So that's why I was experimenting with that big bright light, and then thinking, if I'm going to paint over it, well, then I'm going to paint over it. But it, you know, after having done that, I was like, you know what, I think it kind of works, so I'm just going to keep it. It really also emphasizes the dramatic light coming from that side. The one thing that I was considering is maybe adding on his shirt here. You can see it just disappears. A little bit of a highlight here. I might just do that real quick again. I'm going to add a little bit of gray to this because it's in the background. So adding a bit of, if I just put that white on there like that, or that pink, it's going to kind of leap forward. So I'm trying to kind of just keep it back in the distance a little bit. I think I gotta put more cool red there. That actually kind of works out nice. I like that. I'm gonna do just a bit more. Okay, I think that's good. Yeah, just that little bit of highlights. I'm super curious to see how that looks on the computer screen afterwards, and see if we're able to see the difference between these reds. There, you know, that cool red definitely goes backwards. I'm not sure how much of this warm red. I think it could have maybe even emphasized it a little bit more, but whatever. I think it looks good. Okay, thanks everyone for painting along with me. And I'm trying to think of what's next. I think next week we're doing another Van Gogh, the portrait of the postman, Joseph Roulin, I think is coming up next. And then Alexander Arkapenko, one of the greatest Ukrainian sculptors of all time. So we're going to do a painting of a sculpture, kind of like what we do in Paint the News here, where we take artwork or photographs and recreate them as paintings. So, thank you everybody. We will see you in a few days. Remember to take a photograph, upload it, join the Facebook group. We'll see you guys all very, very soon. Good night, everybody.